Okay. Today is one of those days where I have a long list of potential topics that I'm excited about to explore in this space. So that's a good thing. And I kind of have a backlog going of things that I will want to bring here in the future. And I've already started doing that in other videos that I've made here. Kind of like all the different things I want to talk about and share. But yeah, today is a bit more premeditated coming into this video because I sort of decided on what it is I want to talk about, and I'm going to talk about that. So I'm not going to I am going to ramble, and I'm going to kind of aimlessly explore this topic, but I have thought about this topic a lot. I have wanted to open it up for a while, including some like reference material that I want to use throughout this time, which I think I'm going to do a timer. So I don't have a script or anything like that, but I am more kind of like focused and intentional with it. So I'm going to start with the source material because I think that will be helpful to kind of guide this exploration. So I can show you on my phone, and I can also link it in the body. But this is a podcast that my aunt sent me. Shout out to my aunt, who I don't think watches this, but maybe I'll send it to her. I'm getting a little choked up thinking about it, but she's really wonderful and kind of like has been a really, really important person in my life in many different times. But lately she's been a really important person in my life. Wow, I didn't expect to like get emotional so quickly on this. But she sent me this podcast from BBC. I really like a lot of BBC programming and radio. I think BBC radio is pretty good. This is a lecture series. It's called the Wreath Lectures. I don't really know very well who this person is. I think the podcast comes from an actual lecture that she did. And the person speaking is called Gwen Adsheed. I don't know if I'm saying that right. And the title is 4 Questions About Violence. Does Trauma Cause Violence? I'm going to say it one more time. 4 questions about violence. Does trauma cause violence? It's over an hour long. It's about an hour and 15 minutes. She is a researcher in mental health and also a clinical psychologist, so working in clinical settings, including inpatient hospital settings, and working with people who have committed horrible crimes, violent crimes, and it sort of is just exploring violence as it relates to trauma and kind of why trauma, like what trauma is and if and when that is a cause or an excuse for violence. She mentions the Menendez case. I think that this was first introduced to me when I was watching the Menendez. I wanted to say biopic. That's not what it is. It's with Chloe Sevigny. Incredible. Just all hail Chloe Sevigny. I think she's amazing. Maybe this will ramble into a totally different territory, but I'm going to just say why I love Chloe Sevigny, and I never know how to say her last name, but I think there's something... Oh, and Javier Bardem. Oh, shit. Is it Javier Bardem or Antonio Banderas? Oh, my God. Is that racist? Oh, I don't know. I think it's Javier Bardem because Javier Bardem is in No Country for Old Men. So basically just like I feel as someone who considers themselves an artist, calls themselves an artist, was very passionate about theater for a very long time and sort of dabbled in performing myself. I think the hard part about being an actor and a performing artist, but specifically an actor, is that when you take on a role, you part of yourself kind of is given to that role, and part of your personal development is shaped by playing that role. So people and actors who willingly put themselves into hateable characters, psychologically deranged characters, all of those, like anything really, really that challenges our morality, I see that and I think that that individual is willing to do a service for humanity essentially via the arts, to be willing to put themselves through the psychological and emotional ringer of taking on a persona of a person who is not well and is deranged and does horrible things, and still maintain their sense of self and knowing that they're not that, but then give us that service through the art of, I mean, even just simply like the catharsis of experiencing something horrible like that through art, and kind of having a more profound and deeper appreciation for our stasis, for our security, our normality, our humanity. So yeah, shout out to those actors and others who put themselves through the ringer of taking on a persona, experiencing something horrific, or specifically challenging their goodness and morality, in like the internal compass that I think most of us share, hopefully. So yeah, references the Menendez brothers. I think this podcast came into my life similarly at a time of watching the Menendez brothers. I guess it's a series, which I haven't finished. It was really, really hard to watch. And I think the reason, yeah, so I wanted to kind of bring in the grounding of this reference material of the podcast, because I am not a clinical psychologist. I'm not like deeply, deeply equipped to speak authoritatively and on trauma, violence, mental health. Like I would never claim to be that. So this is more, as is the entire point of this series and this practice of posting these videos. It's not for me to have any authority. It's just for me to have a place to process and kind of chronicle my things I want to explore in a way that makes sense to me. So yeah, I think some feelings about, I guess I'll start with anger, because she talks about anger a lot in this podcast. And when we talk about things like violence and we talk about trauma, it's inevitable that anger as an emotion comes forward. And I think a resounding feeling I have that has kind of persisted with me is that in general, we live in a world that's not comfortable with anger as an emotion. And specifically, as women, society is not comfortable with women's anger. And a lot of the time, the experience of anger as a woman is attributed to hormones, or, well, I think mostly hormones, or being crazy. And it really undermines the fact that we're all entitled to experience anger, and there's something about responsibly sitting with and processing our emotions that we all need to do. This podcast talks about how a lot of the time victims of trauma and abuse don't learn healthy ways to process and communicate their emotions. And so it creates kind of this it creates a warped internal system of emotional processing. So I think that, like, even if you haven't experienced capital T trauma or capital A abuse, I think you we societally inherit. Yeah, so whether you experience that in an immediate sense from your immediate family members, we all, in a larger sense, experience from society, especially women, a shame in experiencing negative emotions, but specifically experiencing anger. Women are not meant to be angry, and if you are an angry woman, you become labeled or ridiculed for you become labeled or ridiculed. A lot of bad things, but yeah, you're not meant to be angry. And I think even in terms of the pantsuit revolution of the 90s, which I feel like I'm always talking about with other people, because, and not necessarily because I'm raving about it, but because I think we all are, which was we had the pantsuit revolution of the 90s, where basically women were all of a sudden free to embrace sex positivity and succeed in the workplace. But succeeding in the workplace, I don't think means leaning into your femininity or leaning into what you're emotionally experiencing. I think it really, like, as is in the name of pantsuit, it's really just about being successful, beating a man at a man's game, or beating a man at a man's game, which essentially means operating as a man in a professional context, which is exactly the same as any other. Oops, I met my time. Should I just stop? Because I feel like I don't like going past the 10 minutes. Yeah, basically, like, nothing really changes. No system really changes by just adhering to the status quo and operating within the same structures of power that got you there in the first place. So yeah, the pantsuit movement wasn't really liberation for anybody, specifically for women, I don't think. And I don't think it really helped with women being able to experience the full spectrum of their emotions. There's so much more to say about, like, trauma and violence, obviously, that it probably does make sense not to keep talking about that here. So maybe this will have, like, part 1, part 2, part whatever. But yeah, anger. I'll keep listening to this podcast, but being allowed to experience anger and being able to process anger is critical for any space and any environment. And I think that people are afraid of sitting with anger because they call anger a secondary emotion. A lot of people call anger a secondary emotion, and I think that that's actually not super helpful, because when you call anger a secondary emotion, what you're saying is that you're angry because of this that really is rooted in some other feeling. And so you need to bypass your anger and only feel that real feeling, which might be fear or shame or rejection or something like that. And for anybody who is working to name and process their emotions, you can't get to a place of being able to work with what's really there if you're being shamed out of not feeling anger. And I think it really also comes to trust of, like, do you trust those close to you to be allowed to be angry and be allowed to communicate your frustration, anger, hurt, all those different things, and know that the people close to you who are receiving that trust you and are able to work with what you're communicating. So I think, especially when there's dynamics of power, which always comes up when I talk on these videos, because usually if someone is willing to communicate hurt, frustration, anger, whatever you want to say, there is some sort of power dynamic that will play out too, which someone who receives that might not want to give in or, like, cede, because they feel like they're defensive or something. So yeah. I also really wanted to talk about the whole Trump-Zelensky thing, which is interesting because that was very emotionally charged. And there seemed to be a lot of anger between them and pride. But I'm gonna leave this for now, and maybe I might, the beauty of morning pages as the format is that I might not feel like I want to revisit this tomorrow, and that's fine. I might want to revisit it in the future, hopefully, and that's also fine. So, so yeah, I might not come back to this tomorrow. I might not post tomorrow, and that's okay because this is my thing and I make the rules. Okay, bye.